Hello. I want to do a bit of a follow-up on a case that I've been following closely since about this time last year, October 2018. So there are two follow-up stories to this, which kind of surprised me because I thought the case had kind of been dismissed at the time, and I'm sort of pleased that it hasn't been, and I'll explain why afterwards. The first report is from the BBC. I'll just read it out. It's not too long, so bear with me. Slap-accused Chinese journalist acted on instinct. A Chinese journalist accused of slapping a Conservative Party delegate acted on natural instinct, fearing she would be attacked, a court heard. Kong Linlin claims she used a hand to push away one of several men who surrounded her after asking a question at last year's Tory conference in Birmingham. Delegate Enoch Liu said he was shocked after the alleged assault. Miss Kong, 49, denies common assault. The defendant, a reporter with Chinese state broadcaster CCTV, as I understand it, is now CGTN, but I guess they still use that name in international formats, said she had been left humiliated after the incident at the city's International Convention Centre on the 30th of September 2018, September actually. Miss Kong said she was approached by Mr Liu, a member of Newcastle-under-Lyme Conservatives, near the end of a question and answer session chaired by Tory MP Fiona Bruce. She told Birmingham Magistrates Court Mr Liu asked her to leave after she claimed one of the panellists was lying by saying they were pro-China. With the assistance of an interpreter, she told the court, "I was shocked. I refused to leave, and then he started to touch me. He used his hands to push me. Not only was the man pushing me, I was surrounded by 4 or 5 people. I was in fear." I'll explain why I'm laughing in a second. Asked by defence barrister Timothy Raggett QC if she'd done anything to the alleged victim, Miss Kong added, "I told him, don't touch me, don't touch me. He just kept pushing me, and at that time I pushed him away. I was being attacked by a male in public. It was my natural instinct to do this." Miss Kong of King's Cross in London maintained she was acting to protect herself when she pushed out in a moment recording video by a bystander, the court was told. The 3-day trial has been adjourned until the 31st of October. Now, in another link to this report, which was reported on the Hong Kong Free Press, it mentions that the defence lawyer, Timothy Raggett QC, representing Kong, said Liu had changed his statement to police after realising he had lied about the incident, according to BBC. "You were the problem, weren't you?" Raggett said. What had happened was that this lady had been shouting out questions to the panel. "Journalists do that in order to get information," he said. "You stepped in and confronted her. The simple reality is you started to manhandle her." Liu denies Raggett's allegations. Okay, this is, firstly, in our system, everyone's entitled to a defence. So, Tim Raggett's doing his job. But his assertions, I think, are a bit absurd. I followed the case closely, and I know people closely involved with it, not Mr Liu, but someone else. And the version that she is putting out is just not what happened. I've seen a video. I know people directly involved. Okay, I wasn't there, but the narrative that she's putting out just seems absurd. So she's trying to make it out that, oh, I'm a poor little woman, I'm frightened, I had to defend myself. What actually happened was Kong Linlin decided to get into a nationalistic rant. She heckled. That's something that Raggett doesn't mention, that, you know, it's not a job of journalists to heckle, it's a job of journalists to ask questions. So he's failing to mention, and I hope the prosecution brings this up, he's failing to mention that she was showing incredible bias. You know, she was bringing her own pro-Beijing sentiments into her work, which isn't surprising because CCTV is a mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party. And I really, really hope that the prosecution brings that up and says that if she is only acting as a journalist, then why is she bringing her personal feelings into her work, which she blatantly was doing, accusing people of being puppets and so on, and being anti-China. She wasn't the victim here. I think it's an absolute travesty for her to make herself out to be the victim. She didn't push this guy off, she slapped him, right? And She was the one that was creating an intimidating atmosphere. She was the one that was trying to slander people. She was the one that was yelling at the top of her lungs. Journalists have a right to ask difficult questions, but what we had here was someone who was trying to act as the media wing of thuggish regime to try and silence legitimate debate about the human rights situation in Hong Kong. That's the reality. And I've mixed feelings about this. On one hand, I'm pleased that it hasn't been dropped. I'm pleased that she is being held to account in a court of law. On the other hand, I think it's a disgrace that she's even in this country still. As far as I'm concerned, she's little better than a spy. I mean, this is a woman who calls herself a reporter, but if, reporters for a communist news network are basically propagandists. That's what they are. They're not journalists in the sense of people holding power to account, which is what journalists should be. She is basically a propagandist for the Chinese Communist Party. So for her to play the victim, I think what probably happened was Mr. Liu asked her calmly to leave. She got angry. I've seen the footage. She was very hysterical, very angry. And, she didn't like someone standing up to her, so she lashed out. And now she's using the gender issue, the gender card. Oh, well, I'm a poor woman. It's pathetic. He didn't slap her. He didn't hit her. And I think it's an utter travesty that CCTV and the Chinese embassy actually had the gall, the sheer arrogance, to demand an apology from this country. Personally, I hope an example is made of her. I hope she is found guilty. I hope she is fined. And I hope she's deported. Because no one should be... I mean, if anyone was being intimidated, it was the delegates who had to put up with her rants. Her pro-Beijing, pro-dictatorship rants. She went there not to do her job as a journalist, but to basically act as a propagandist for the Chinese Communist Party. Her behaviour is disgraceful, and I think she should be held to account. I guess the only reason she's still in this country is she hasn't yet been found guilty. But as soon as she is, and I hope she is, she needs to be deported. She is a foreign criminal. That's what she is, if she's found guilty. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I know whose side I'm on, but, due process and all that. So I'll be following this closely. I get that Mr. Raggart has his job to do, he has to defend her, but I think he's got a very weak case. I mean, he's trying to make the victim in this case out to be the aggressor. But it wasn't Kong Linlin that was slapped, it was Mr. Liu. And, to play the gender card is frankly a little bit nauseating. Being a woman doesn't give you a right to act obnoxiously. And for her to use that is just pathetic, frankly. If she is found guilty, I think we need to make an example of her. We need to kick her out of the country, and then we need to take a hard line on CCTV journalists operating in this country. We can say as journalists you're expected to abide by impartiality laws, to do your job as journalists. She had a right to ask questions. She didn't have a right to yell at people, to try and create an atmosphere of intimidation, which is precisely what she's doing. And, this is typical communist behaviour. It's typical Chinese nationalistic behaviour. Play the victim when you don't get your own way. She is the personification of Chinese overseas arrogance, and she needs to be made an example of. So I'll be following this case closely. I'm not sure when it's scheduled to conclude, just as the trial continues. But the 3-day trial has been adjourned until the 31st of October, so, this could rumble on for some time. I know whose side I believe. I do not believe that this was a case that they were being heavy-handed with her and kicked her out. Of course, China used it to say, the Western hypocrites, they don't believe in free speech. The thing is, free speech doesn't give you a right to bully people, doesn't give you a right to shout people down. She had more freedom to spout out her nonsense than British journalists would have in China. So, we really need to robustly confront Beijing's arrogance. And this is just the latest example of it. Not the latest, but a example of it. I mean, if she didn't want to be kicked out, then she should have behaved in the responsible way. Not like a crazy, hysterical ultranationalist, which is what she was doing. So yeah, I just hope this has the right conclusion. I'll be very disappointed and frustrated if she is cleared of all charges and the victim is, made out to be the villain here, because based on everything I've seen from the case, I've seen the footage, I know people involved, that just isn't what happened.